Beyond question, we are living in unprecedented times. But while the circumstances may be new, the governmental oppression is not. Think back to our Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The question was, what is the proper role of government? Where do we derive our authority from the consent of the governed? What is the function to preserve unalienable rights? Same questions with which we're dealing today. So, since it's the same issue, I think we should read a quote from James Madison that basically spoke to the citizens about their duty of vigilance to preserve their rights and come against any experiment of their liberties. He said the preservation of a free government requires not merely that the metes and bounds which separate each department of power be invariably maintained, but more especially that none of them be suffered to overlap the great barrier which defends the rights of the people. The rulers who are guilty of such an encroachment exceed the commission from which they derive their authority and are tyrants. The people who submit to it are governed by laws made neither by themselves nor by an authority derived from them, and are slaves, because it is proper to take alarm at the first experiment on our liberties. We hold this prudent jealousy to be the first duty of citizens. In short, what Madison was telling us is that as citizens, our primary duty needs to be jealously and zealously protecting our liberties from governmental encroachment. He says that if you're submitting to a ruler that goes beyond the authority that they possess, you're basically submitting to tyrants, and as such, you're slaves. When Ben Franklin told us that they had given us a republic if we could keep it, clearly that was another signal to us as citizens that we bore the responsibility of preserving that republic. So when we're confronted with executive orders from governors that are expansive and capricious and step all over our First Amendment liberties, our liberty of free exercise, of free speech, of free assembly, and those liberties, by the way, were not given to us by the government. They are rights which we inherently possess, over which the government is not to encroach. When we submit to such orders, we literally are submitting to tyrants, and we are becoming slaves. Now, there is historic precedent that allows for the government to be able to step in and limit our First Amendment rights when there is a compelling state interest. And while we will concede, yes, there's a compelling government interest, the reality is those limitations the government imposes have to be narrowly defined, narrowly construed. Are they being narrowly construed? Clearly not. They're expansive, they're oppressive, and as to certain groups of people, they're doubly oppressive in an as-applied standard. Not only that, many of these limitations on our freedoms have the stench of pretext, where we can do certain things but can't do others. So these are not being done in a constitutional manner. The question remains then, what are we to do? America, the world is watching us. How are we going to respond to excessive governmental control? Are we going to respond in fear and submission and cower back? Or are we going to push back against oppression simply by choosing to live our lives, earn our livelihood, and maintain America as the freest nation on earth? If you, like hundreds of thousands of others, are tired of this oppressive governmental tyranny, click below, sign our petition. We want to make sure that your voice is heard.